Vanakkam and welcome to Tamizh Suvai radio. This is RJ Sudha, founder and anchor of Tamizh Suvai. This month, as you all know, is the Women's History Month, and we've been talking to many women who have made history. And today, it's not an exception. Today, we have Dr. Ranjani Rao, who is a scientist as well as an author. Many of you have read her articles in India Currents, and you've seen her books also come around. Welcome to the show, Dr. Ranjani Rao. How are you doing?
Thanks, Sudha, for inviting me to the show. I'm doing well. It's Saturday morning where I am in Singapore. So I'm happy to have the first call in the morning with you.
Yeah. The only recollection of Singapore is our en route to Chennai from San Francisco. We just love the Singapore airport, the Singapore city. We just find, okay, if it is, we try most of the airports, we don't want to stay there for too long. But for some reason, when it comes to flying via Singapore Airlines, we say, okay, let's have a 10-hour break. We won't mind having this 10-hour transit in Singapore because the city is so beautiful and we are never tired of getting out of the airport and seeing the city and the malls and eating out and all that. So we have Dr. Ranjani Rao coming to us from Singapore. It's a very odd our connection, but we are still trying to make this work for you, just to make it more inspirational for the women who are listening. Dr. Ranjani Rao is a trained scientist and a self-taught writer. She's the author of 3 books, 3 award-winning books, and her award-winning personal essays and op-eds have appeared in several digital and print publications and anthologies. Originally from Mumbai, India, Ranjani has spent several years in the United States and now lives in Singapore with her family. Now, Ranjani, I have a few questions for you that I have some questions on your professional side as a scientist, and the other one as an author. But then, how being a scientist turned you into an author, etc. And I think I'd like to focus on your personal life and what actually helped you, and what exactly you focused on the book that you wrote, and how would you communicate, and how would you help other women who are going through a divorce in their lives, and how would you help them read this book and help them with the message. All right. So Ranjani, let's come to the 2 professional hats that you're wearing, as scientist and as well as an author. Could you tell us about your scientist hat that you're wearing? What kind of, it's not an easy thing, being a scientist, having an IT job, having a doctoral job, is something that is very common for women that we do, or even teaching, I would say. But being a scientist is hard, I would say. It requires a lot of focus and a lot of times, a lot of long hours, I would say. Tell us more about your scientist profession. What exactly do you do?
Okay, I'm a pharmaceutical scientist. So my basic degree was in pharmacy, and I came to the US and did my PhD. So I came as a very young person to the US, and I had the good fortune and pleasure of getting my PhD in the US. And I really enjoyed the education system. And at the end of 5 years, I had a PhD.
Wow.
And the studying part, the getting the degree part was not, I would say it was difficult. Anyone who commits themselves to a long course of study will tell you that it was a long road. But it was also very something that was natural to me because I had been a good student in school and I had taken up science education. I didn't realize that the more commitment I put towards my studies, that I really was investing my life into a profession. And then my responsibility was to stay in that profession because I already had invested my years. And of course, in the US, I studied on scholarship. So there was that investment that was made in me to get that degree. So I felt a great sense of responsibility to work and use that education. I also liked what I did. And today it's more than 25 years that I have been in the industry. And the one thing that surprises me is that how many women get a good education. They get a good start in life. Indian women, urban India, parents generally, are supportive of education. But the problem is once you enter the workforce, that women enter it with great enthusiasm. They start off, all excited. And then life gets in the way, there are expectations of self, of family, of society. And one by one, it chips down on their resolution to stay in the workplace. It may not always be their choice. It may just be circumstances. It may be sequence of events that happen. But then they drop out of the workplace. So we have a large number of highly educated women in science who do not continue to be in the workplace. And that is kind of sad, because the more women we have who continue to be in the workplace, they will reach higher positions.
And
They
they
will be
will
more
pull in more
sympathetic.
women as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they will be good role models. They can be good mentors, and they can pull people, the next generation, into the workforce. And that is what I feel a great responsibility even today. I feel that I should continue to stay in the workplace. Of course, the fact that I like my job, I like the work I do, as well as I see value in the work I do, because I work in developing new medicines. I even worked on COVID therapies very
Nice. Very
recently.
nice. Mhm.
Yeah, so I feel that by staying in the workplace, by talking about it, like with you, or writing articles about it, that I want to spread that word. I want to spread that enthusiasm. I also want to give a realistic take on life. It's not going to be easy, but it is something that is very satisfying,
Absolutely.
and that we should all, not just women,
After all, you have
but
spent like 25 years plus 5 years and plus the school years working towards this degree, and where you are today. I think you should just continue on your career, and not just the career part of it. And as you said, rightly said, you have to be a mentor and be a role model for other women who have come almost halfway through and then say, okay, we have Dr. Ranjani Rao, who has been through so many hurdles in life, and she's still putting up a brave face and working on. And I think I can also do it. And they can always come to you because you have seen enough hurdles in your life. And you can always say, yeah, I've been there, done that, do this instead of doing that. And you can always suggest. Life may not be the same way for them as it was for you, but it can be slightly different. But at least they can come and talk to you about what are the different options, etc. And you can tell them what they can work on. So that is good. So you are part of the pharmaceutical industry, and you did contributions to the COVID. That is fantastic. Kudos to you. I'm sure one way or the other, I was a recipient of your research. Thanks for that. And I'm proud to say that at least to this point, I have been COVID free. I have not been a victim of COVID so far. At least I think I might have, but none of the results have turned positive for me. Anyway, moving on. How does being a scientist affected you as an author? How did or I should say, has being a scientist inspired you to be an author? Or how did it work out?
So my writing life actually started after I had finished my PhD, and I had moved to California, and I was pregnant with my daughter at that time, and it was a very confusing time for me. It was after this whole PhD thing. Suddenly there was a job, there was a move from the east coast of the US to the west coast, and
Oh,
then there
so
was a
where
baby.
was your PhD done? Which
I
university?
studied at the University of Maryland at Baltimore.
Ah, okay. So you were
So
away.
I really did a cross-country move in the
Ah,
first trimester of my pregnancy, and
okay.
I started a new job. It was a new place, and it had been a long journey to become to get pregnant. So it was a very confusing time for me, because there was a lot of expectations on me, on my body, on my ability to function in a new place and to do well in my first job. So I wanted to capture those things in a journal. So I started writing a journal during my
So
second
you were
trimester.
determined to succeed in every aspect of your life, I can tell. You're determined to succeed in a profession, you're determined to succeed to be a mother, and you're also determined to be a good wife and be an overall good human being. That's all I could tell. Okay.
Yeah, so I felt the pressure of it all.
Oh,
I'm not going to,
understandable.
make it sound easy, but I
Mhm.
think that time writing helped, writing for myself. So I started writing, basically I started typing in a Microsoft Word document what I was feeling. And it was mostly about the baby, because pregnancy was very exciting. And then the baby was born. So I had a very short maternity leave, as it was, those years in the US. I returned back to work. My mother was there to take care of my baby in the initial months, but I knew that soon I would have to put her in daycare if I had to continue my job. So again, there was a major, life change happening there because I had to make a choice to put my child in daycare, which I had not experienced as a child because my mother had been a
Was always
stay-at-home mom,
around. Mhm.
right? So I continued to write that journal, which I thought was about my baby, but turns out it was about me, me as a pregnant woman, me as a mother, me as a working woman, struggling with the day-to-day things. And
I
I
wish
found it
every woman would document it. I wish my grandmother had documented that. Or, so much. I mean, her life would have been so different, would have been so different from what I'm going through. But end of the day, I think we women kind of juggle between multiple things in different ways, but we still have multiple things on our plate. Mhm.
right. And documenting that, what you said is it doesn't have to be shared with everyone. It can be your personal record, or it can be just for your daughter or for your family. And it becomes a history, right? That gets
History. That's what
captured.
I was going to ask. That's a term I wanted to put in. History is when documentation began, and that's exactly what you started. The history of your life began. Okay.
Yeah, so I think writing started as a very personal activity for me. It wasn't meant for public sharing or consumption. But one day I think the San Jose Mercury News put out, they asked people to send in stories for a particular column. I think it used to appear on a Saturday. And just on a whim, I took one of the things I had written and sent it. And I had no idea if they would take it because I was a no name. I was not a journalist. I had
Oh,
never had any
but you had
training.
this. But you had a doctor degree with you. Okay.
Yeah, but I was writing about life. So I actually wrote about the contradictions of motherhood. And lo and behold, they said, yes, can you send us a photograph of you and your child? And I did. And suddenly there it was, half page in a Saturday newspaper. And a lot of people saw it, people who knew me.
Good.
And they left me voicemails or they called me or talked to me about it. And suddenly I realized that there was a lot of power in sharing your personal story. And it was, yeah, maybe it was flattering, but it was also very humbling because most people said, I feel the same way.
Um,
I feel the same way as a new
uh,
mother.
there's also it's not only power of sharing; it's the power of writing. The power of the pen is more stronger than the power of the sword, as they say. I think the
Yeah.
power of the pen there took effect.
Yeah, so I then realized that, okay, writing is one part, sharing is the second part, and it
Yeah.
looks like it resonates, what I'm writing resonates with people. Then I became a little more open to sharing my writing, and India Currents, the Bay Area magazine, was quite supportive. They published a lot of my pieces, and then that just got me into a rhythm. So it was like a virtuous cycle because the more stuff would appear in print and people would say, I like what you wrote, the more inclined I was to write. But there is much more that I have written for me than I have shared publicly. And to link the scientist and the writer parts of me, they are two different parts. But I think being a scientist helped me be very rigorous in my approach. So I study things deeply or feel them deeply,
Yes.
and then I revise, so I make sure that it's really good. And then I'm open to rejection, like publication of scientific papers. Anyone who's done that knows that your article may not always get published. So I think though that part helped. I was open to sending things out. I was bold, but I decided to not take it to heart if I got rejected.
Okay.
So I continued, and that increased the body of work on my writing side, which has nothing to do with my science. I write about life.
Okay. And it's mostly your life or what you see around you or where you grew up with, etc. I've read most of your articles, I should say, and your book as well. Yeah. All right. So tell us about this cross country thing. USA, you spent some good amount of years in the US, and then now you're in Singapore, and then your career had to change. Everything had to change. Tell us about all your career change, your personal life changes, etc.
Right. So as I mentioned, I had just turned 22 when I moved to the US, and then I spent a good 14 years in the US on the East Coast and West Coast, almost equal amount of time. And I moved back to India. And that time, it was for family reasons. And as a family, we decided it was the right time for us to move. So my then husband and daughter, who was 6 years old at that time, we moved uh, to India and decided to, live the rest of our life there.
Ah,
But the thing I didn't anticipate, and that was the major shakeup for me, was that my marriage fell apart in India after so many years of marriage. So in the US also, it had been difficult. Though, we were so focused on, two people going to work and, dropping the kid, picking up. It had just been unsatisfactory all along. But in India, it really blew up because, the situation is different. There are more people involved, and whatever was the fragile nature of our bond already broke to a point where I couldn't stay in that house anymore with my husband and his parents. So I decided to move out, and for 3 years I lived in the same city because I had a job, which again I liked. I always liked my work, and I tried to create an environment for me and my daughter to go on with our lives. And she would visit her dad on weekends and stay with me on weekdays. And it was just sort of a limbo situation where we didn't go ahead with any legal procedures. And at the end of 3 years, there came a point where finally I was also hesitating on taking a call, and then finally decided to take a call, and we filed for divorce. So that was really another major turning point. So again, moving countries, I had left my job, which I had been very happy with in California. I really enjoyed my work. I had made a good set of friends. I had a good life. I was writing, so I had some visibility on the writing. I had a good exercise routine. I used to practice yoga. I had a good set of friends, and my daughter also had friends. So it was a starting over in India, but then I had to do another starting over as a single mom. And again, when things happen, they all happen in a row. And then my mother passed away during this time. And that was a major shock for me because I had been very close to my mom. She had been a big influence on my life. She knew about the difficulties I was having in my marriage. But again, I was just sitting on the fence, not taking a decision. So my mother passed away, so that changed our family dynamic on my parents' side as well. My dad was a widower, and so he spent his time between me and my siblings. So everything just changed. The good thing was my job was stable, and I could support myself on my job. I could pay my bills, even though it was not very simple to be a single parent. India, the after school daycare situation and all is not that great. So it was very stressful, very stressful. And one day I had to take a call to give up my job.
Oh, God.
Because my daughter would come home from school and she would be alone.
Oh, okay.
And I could not, every day I would worry until I returned home. And this was before work from home. This was before, there was so much flexibility. And I worked for a company which also had like connections to the US. So we had evening calls, evening time in India. And that time you had to be in the office to take the calls, things like that.
Okay.
And it just wasn't working out. So it was a very radical decision to leave my job because I needed to also support myself.
Yeah, and the daughter too.
And for both of us, right? And for the rest of our lives. So I actually gave up my job and I started doing consulting where a lot of the work could be done from home. And again, it was not that simple, but over time, right, things worked. Once I made my peace with how things were working out. Again, if I look at the 25-year-old me who expected a great career in science and a nice trajectory upwards where I would, become vice president or, become an important person in a big company, all that I had to leave that, right? Because I left the great job in the US, I left the good job in India, and suddenly I was this person with a business card which didn't have a famous name on it. It just had my name. And so it was a lot of defining and reclaiming who I was without the support of a husband, without the backing of a big company name. I just had to build myself up. And those were the years where I think in a way, I became a different person. I had to reinvent myself, but in a way, I also went back to the person I was before I was married. I was a very enthusiastic and optimistic teenager. I was a very forward thinking, very outspoken, generally, I would say bold young woman at that time.
Yeah.
And somehow in the marriage, I had just, become a different person. I was always anxious. I was always trying to minimize my own, everything. I was just trying to make it work. And then now I could once again be
You.
me. A new, older, wiser maybe, but also a more calm and a more confident person. So that was a major life for me. And then I moved to Singapore about 10 years ago because I got remarried.
Very
And
nice.
that was an unexpected thing, which I really wasn't planning on. But after coming here and a few years into it, I realized that I never talked about my divorce. I wrote about things, I kept writing, but I didn't write about this whole separation and divorce phase of my life. Literally, I was keeping it undercover.
Right, I'm sure.
It didn't feel very honest.
But many women don't talk about it, leave alone writing about it. I think I'm sure you're probably the first person. We had another person recently on a show who just goes and go about her divorce. And when she got married, she was happy. But when she came here, she realized that the man was already married, and he had like several wives. So that was horrible. And then, but she had to be with him because she needed the green card, and that he already had 2 children by then. And finally, she walked out of the marriage. She started her own babysitting company, and then now she's a very successful entrepreneur. And she talks about her divorce very boldly. Now we are at an age where women don't shy away from talking about their divorce. I think we have moved forward. We still have time, and we still have places to go. But I think we have reached a point where women can look up to women like you and the other person I told you that, okay, she has done it. I think we can do it. That's the point we've reached.
Yeah, so that's why I thought that I should write about it. And I think my focus in my book was not about what broke the marriage. It was about how I built myself up.
It need not be, because each marriage breaks for different reasons. So I think that should not be the focus at all. And I think the main message should be how you rebuilt your life, and that's a takeaway. That should be the takeaway from each book, and how a woman reading it should get some messages from that. Yeah, tell us about.
Yeah, that's why I particularly made the title "Rewriting My Happily Ever After." Because I said it was my happily ever after, which didn't involve a knight in shining armor. No Prince Charming came to rescue me. It was me literally rescuing myself and rewriting the script, which earlier, parents had written or society had written for me, but now I wrote it for myself. And that the hope was that, because many of us, when we are in a dark place, we feel that, how will I get through this? Am I the only one going through this? Am I the first one going through this? And in our heart, we know that we are not the first person going through this. Someone else has walked this road before. But again, there is no documentation of it.
Right.
There is no true story, because, fiction, and I read a lot of fiction, but you already know that it's a made-up story. That this person doesn't exist. There is a separation. But when you write a memoir, which is what I wrote, which is my own story, you know that even if I don't know Ranjani, there is this person who went through this. This is her story. And then you feel, if she can do it, I can do it, right? And my path may be slightly different. Yeah. But I can get to this place.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can rebuild any way you want it, but she has rebuilt it. The other, Renu Dilanji, has rebuilt it. There's one other lady who came, she has rebuilt it. Why can't I? That should be the message. And I'm so glad that you did it. And I'd like Renu Dilanji also. I hope she gets read the book, and I'll ask her also to write a memoir. Even it could be like a 20-page, 25-page book. But I think it's very important that every one of you document your journey, at least the happily ever after part of it.
Yeah, so that's what, I wrote it for that reason. What I didn't expect was a response to it. So I got a lot of people who reached out, like they would have heard about the book, and or someone would have recommended, and they would read it and they would email me, or they would DM me on Instagram or on Facebook and say, I'm reading your book. Thank you for writing this. This part really resonates. This is exactly what happened to me.
Oh, goodness.
I was blown away because, I was just writing my story. How can it be exactly what happened to so many people? And then I realized that it wasn't the story that was exact, it was the emotions that were resonating.
So the way you
They-
put it also, your language is just so relatable. Every one of your articles I've read them, whether it's India Currents or your small articles, your anthologies that you've written, everyone is just absolutely relatable. And they're real, you write them from your heart, and that's what matters.
Right. So I think that helped, and I was really blown away because many of the women were much younger than say my generation. And then I realized that a lot of this is still continuing, all of the stigma and the silence about divorce. And while it is more common, all of us know people now who have been divorced compared to say
Oh,
when I
of
was
course.
20 years old. I didn't know anyone who was divorced. But the truth is people don't want to talk about it. It's a
Right.
hush hush. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, she used to be divorced, or people just want to blow that aside. Then I said, okay, why don't we talk about it? Why don't we bring more stories to light? Everyone may not write a book, but everyone who's been through divorce has a journey to share. And that's when I launched my podcast, which is called
Nice.
Rewrite Your Happily Ever After. And
Okay.
so I wanted to invite women to speak up about their journey. And to my surprise, many women who had come on the other side and built their life after divorce were happy to come and share their story.
Fantastic.
And
Okay.
so every month I interview at least one person who is willing to share their story. And these are Indian women, women of Indian origin who may be in India or abroad. So I've had people from Hong Kong, US, UK, and Singapore, and other places. So, and each one has a different story. For someone, it is about having children, someone who didn't have children, who struggled with getting a divorce, someone who had to take up a job to support her family, while someone else decided to be a stay-at-home mom after her divorce because she wanted to bond with her children. So all kinds of stories are coming up, and they're all heartfelt, genuine. Just like you and I are talking, they talk about it.
True.
So that has been one very satisfying thing,
Amazing.
a new thing which I had not done before, podcasting.
When you they say you don't have to give or give wealth in terms of money to people. This is a great way of giving to the community. What you're doing, this is just wonderful. You're just empowering more women who have otherwise would have gone unnoticed. They would have felt helpless and things like that. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Is there any specific message that you want to say to the women for the Women's History Month?
Yes, absolutely. I think women's lives are important. Our day-to-day life, to someone else may seem very ordinary, but it's not. Because by default, for whatever reason, women's lives are not their own. It is very entangled with everyone around, whether you are married, you have children or not. A woman is much more an integral part of society, so you are woven into the fabric of society. So everything you do is important because you are holding it up. So in terms of Women's History Month, I encourage everyone to talk about your stories, to write them down if you can. And if you don't like writing, talk about it, because everyone is happy to share. Even oral history is important. And typically, like they say, history is documented by the winners, right? If there is a war, it's the victor who will write the history from their point of view.
Right.
So if women don't document, we are leaving the details of history to the other half, who's writing our stories, or who is writing how we should be, or how they think we were. But I think we should write the details of our daily lives, even if it seems very ordinary, because it is anything but ordinary. Everything we do is so outward focused. It's so inclusive. The way we build community, the way we build friendship, the way we nurture things, plants,
Those are very
relationships,
natural for us. Yeah, exactly.
everything we do. And these are very important things. And the more we shine the light on them, the more its value will come. I feel very sad when I see all the emotional labor that women put into their families and homes is not counted, right?
Mm.
You don't get paid for this work. You don't get acknowledged for this work. It is assumed that you will do it, whether you like it or not, or if it is natural to you or not. Why? Because we make it seem easy. We make it seem seamless. But it is a major part of our life. Unless we talk about it,
Yeah.
who is going to do it? And everyone's story is important. So don't think that you have to be a celebrity, you have to be famous, you have to be a person of importance. You are important. Your story is important. So please document your stories. Talk about it as much as you can. Get on forums where your story is valued and highlighted, like your forum. You are inviting
Well
women
said.
to tell
Well
their
said.
stories. Please do that, and don't be shy. The more we speak up, the more we empower everyone around us, and we can be that beacon that someone is looking for when they are in a dark time in their lives.
Yeah.
That would be my message.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjani. Wonderful speaking to you. You are an inspiration, and I hope you will pass on the beacon to other women of the same kind. And I hope we have more women come out and speak about their stories, and so the world will grow. Thank you again for coming on to this show. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sudha. Thank you.